So I've got these two little handles to glue into the clear plastic, and you can use liquid glue. The way to do it is to put a bit of glue on the part so that you're controlling how much is on there and where it is, rather than placing the part and then trying to flood the joint with glue as you might normally do. You're on a hiding to nothing if you do that. But if you put in just a small amount on a small area, then you're in control of that, and any fogging that might happen is only going to happen in the area where you have placed the part, and usually that means it's being painted. Now, if we were just gluing it into a glass panel and it wasn't going to get painted, I would use something like the MIG Ultra Glue or some PVA or something non-gassing. But because we're painting this, I have gone with the liquid poly, and that one hasn't glued, so I'm going to come back and do that. The problem with putting a small amount on is if you faff about putting the part on, that glue is dried and you haven't got enough to hold it in place. There, they look great. That's our two handles on. Okay, we are going to get this primed. I'm using a white primer, which means I need to change my needle from the 0.2 that's in there to a 0.4, which is really the minimum size you need for putting this primer down. So what we'll do is we'll prime white on the top, let that dry, flip her over, and then prime white underneath, and we can prime some of the individual panels we've got as well. Doing a bit of a hybrid. Some of our decals are coming from the Avalon set, so that's the main markings, but it doesn't amount to very many decals actually. And then we're going back to the Airfix kit decals for some of the stencils, which will be based on this one here, the option C, but I will be using the black wing anti-slip decals from option B, because the others have a little yellow frame, which isn't correct for the version we're doing. So yeah, there's a little bit of robbing from everywhere to get this where I want it to be. Painting's done now, largely, except we haven't put the black in there. To be honest, I'd forgotten and I painted it all red. And then it was only when I've come to do the decals I've gone, oh yeah, it was black. So I do need to rectify the nose, although I have painted the prop correctly in the black. So that's not a big issue. So we're going to get the decals on, then I'll correct that black paintwork. Then we're pretty much varnishing. Not going to do much on the weathering, as we've said before. So we're nearly we're nearly done. So let's crack on with the decals, and I think we'll start with the Avalon markings and see how they perform. I've never used them before, so this will be quite an interesting experience. So we're going to start with the tail, I think. So the tail, they're calling for 24, so I assume the other side is 25, although they don't explicitly say that. Oh, right, 24 replies to, right, no, I'm with it. Right, okay, let's crack on with this. Get these cut out and get them in the soak. Trying to patch the decals together is quite a bit of fun, actually. I'm finding that I'm having to take, when I look at these instructions, you can see there's markings that aren't included in their decals. And I'm trying to find decals that look similar from these. So there's certain ones we can take from the sides here, which look correct, and then we're taking some off another one, and so on. And one or two stencils that you'd imagine would be on all of them. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Hopefully I won't get anything wrong on this, but well, you never know. Right, let's try this anti-slip. That's the easiest one, really, because it's nice and simple. Square should go on no problem. Our decals are all done, and I have given it a gloss varnish. Actually, there's a couple of bits I missed, but you can see the difference in the shine between the paint and just one coat of gloss varnish, which was the Vallejo acrylic varnish, which is one of my favourite gloss varnishes, to be honest. And obviously, the more coats you put on, the shinier it is. So this is just one coat, and it just takes it up above that sort of satin finish. So quite happy with that. And that's all gone down okay. That's all gone down okay. We avoided these decals here so that they were a little bit more matte, but I'm going to put a little matte coat over those. We'll talk about what we've got to do in a sec. The decals themselves, there's some register issues. You can see on the tail there, there's some register at the bottom at the side there, so they're not brilliant. I'd think twice about using them again, if I'm honest. And that's been the same with all the aftermarket in this. None of the aftermarket in this kit that I've used has particularly worked well. So that the Kit World 3D decals, I don't think I'd be enthusing about using those again. And the Edward paint masks, their solution for the bulbous windows didn't work particularly well either. So yeah, the kit itself we'll talk about at the end. So this is where we're up to. It doesn't look like there's much left, but it's a little bit deceiving. So we've got the wheels left to put on, the engine to mount. We've got the canopy to mount. I've got a little bit of painting left to do inside the canopy. Propeller can be mounted on. Rear wheel can be mounted on. This goes inside the canopy frame. That's ready to go. We've got some black painting to do here. We've got the anti-dazzle matte or satin black strip to go on there, which also incorporates these two, the top of these two panels. That needs a gloss coat I'm putting on, and I've modified it. So I was given a heads up by Sully actually that this didn't fit too well, and it has a little right angled lug on each one of these, which fits into these two holes here, and if you put those in, it actually sits about 1 millimeter below, and you have this massive gap, and it's not good at all. But if you trim them off, which is what was my first step to the solution, was you can actually then just align that. So yeah, easy to sort, but shouldn't be there to start with, in fairness. On the inside of these, I'm not happy with the presentation of them, so I need to just go down and sand these down a little bit and repaint them. And then we've got these two bits here, and I'm going to scratch build this little red lamp on its mount, which goes on top of the canopy. So yeah, that'll be quite interesting to get put on. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a little bit of scratch building, as I always do. It's always handy if you've got build a model and you've got sprue which has got different colours and things like that. It's always handy to keep hold of those things. They come in really useful for different scratch building tasks. And you can see I've got stretch sprue and all sorts in here, so just keep hold of all sorts of things like this, because they are handy. I mean, that can become running water in a diorama. In fact, I'm likely to be using that in my tank diorama coming out of the drain pipe. So there's lots and lots of uses for stretch sprue, so always worth keeping hold of sprue of different colours. And as you can see, that's paying off, because this little bit of clear red sprue, which came off an ATAC walker, that's now handy for making a red lamp. Okay, we are getting towards the end of this build, and I've got some questions rattling around in my head that I need to answer. Some of them are even related to this. The first thing was, do I do a wash or not? And when you look at the actual aircraft, it's just all over one colour. And it's so clean and well maintained that I think the answer is no, I'm not going to. And to be honest, I've not quite enjoyed building this as much as I have other kits recently. And I'm not really sure why. So I'm sort of at that point where I want to get it done, but I don't want to overdo it. I also want it to look right. So I think what we're going to do is leave the wash, and we've got one or two things left to do. So we've got the canopy to get on there. I've got a bit of touch up to do. We've got the wheels to put on, the engine to mount, a little bit of black paint to go on there, and on the side pieces of the engine cowling there, and then get that propeller on. And then we are pretty much done, because we're not going to have pilots in. So we're nearly there. I think my next job is a little bit of touch up, particularly on the green. So we'll probably start with the green, and we'll do the red last. I think I've got a little bit of touch up to do on the black in a couple of places. And as I've got to paint the inside of the cowling with that satin black as well, we can do all that at the same time. So without further ado, let's crack on with that. Well, actually, before I touch up, I need to make more of a mess, because I'm not happy with the finish on the inside. I thought I got it cleaned up, but you can still see the witness of the 4 ejector pin marks in here. So I'm just going to sand that down and try and get a better job of that. Which leads into the touch-up that we've got to do anyway. So the black anti-dazzle stripe that's on the top of the nose of the aircraft, it terminates with a sort of a rounded end just before the end of the aircraft, before the prop. So I've just put some masking tape on and drawn that on, and we can just cut that out with a knife so we can paint that in. So I've also masked off the edges, so we're ready to get painted. Using Vallejo 71057, which is the Model Air Black, for this task. And Actually, we'll start with the aircraft. When we're brush painting it on, I trust this paint when I'm brush painting it. I'm expecting we're going to have to do 2 coats, but it behaves really well under a paintbrush, this paint, so I'm not worried. I've done my best to line these up. It's a little tricky with the moulded on hinges, but I've done my best to get them lined up. But as they're open, it won't be obvious if they're slightly off, to be honest. We'll give that a little bit of time to dry off, and then we'll come back and give it a second coat. Right, I think I've got these cleaned up and we have painted in the black strip. So I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these in, and then I can paint that and touch up the area all in one before we even attach the engine. I'm a little bit concerned about building up the front end because it rests on this point here and this point here that we already know there's an alignment issue with. So how this is all going to come together, I don't know, but we're going to start by gluing those on, I think. So actually my first job is just to scrape a little bit of this paint off. I don't often do this, but this paint's been on here for quite a while now and it's quite hard, so I just want to give the glue a little bit of a chance. Haven't deliberately painted those edges anyway, but there's a little bit of paint got on there over the processes we've done. Right, okay, so which glue actually? We'll go with the extra thin. Doesn't quite 100% line up. That's me, not the kit. There we go, that's the first one on. Okay, time to scratch build our little lamp. So we need a little red lamp that sits on the top of the canopy. Here's the picture of it. So to do that, I think my plan is to use a combination of red sprue for the lamp. So this is a clear red sprue. Seem to remember we had laser beams for an ATAT walker on there. So yeah, I've got a little box I keep of sprue. Primarily clear sprue, but you can see I've also got some white sprue in there as well. Quite good for icicles. And I use this for stretch sprue. So all of this has been made from sprue. But I do keep some of the older Airfix soft plastic in here because it's great for working with in when you're doing anything like this. And then obviously we can use the sprue that we've got from the actual aircraft as well. So I think there's only 2 parts, number 10 and number 19 there left to add on. So we could use that. So let's have a go at shaping something to fit our screen. So we're going to start by chopping a bit of sprue out, and we want something that's roughly the same diameter. So not one of the big thick outer frame ones, but I think one of those will do nicely. So let's cut that off. See what the sprue's like in the middle. Sometimes they're a bit hollow in the middle, and you don't really want that. But that's a nice solid one, so we'll cut a fairly big section of that, I think. Okay, so now we have a piece of sprue. What we want to do first is shape it roughly to how it is on the canopy. And on the canopy, it's sort of angled backwards. So what we need to do is cut a bit of a chamfer in. See, I'd normally put this in my vise, but because I'm doing it with my camera, I've decided to cut a corner. Is that going to come back and bite me? Probably. Better. So I'm just going to tidy it up. So I need to make a bit of a point on it. Okay, that is not looking too bad. That's about right. Okay, now I just need to reduce the diameter a little bit, so just going to use one of these flexophiles that are really good for making sure we don't put a flat on. There we go, that's looking really quite good now. So the next thing is to sort the height out. So it goes on there like that. Right, time for a bit of chopping. So as we look at this, it needs to be angled backwards. It's a bit tricky. Naturally wants to roll the wrong way, doesn't it? So I'm going to cut it oversized deliberately, and that's going to allow me to sand it back. Well, there's our little additional item made. What we've got to do now is put a little red lamp on the top. I'm going to start by just rounding off the edges, because it's very gently domed, this lamp. It's really strange, soft, almost rubber-like plastic, this. I'm hoping with a gloss coat on this, it'll look really quite nice. So let's get nice low grit and see if we can smooth it. That's not looking bad at all, actually. Okay. Right. Let's cut a bit of lamp off. Okay. Let's get the canopy on. Let's get these wheels on. They look pretty good. Right, I'll just get the geometry right and then we can let them dry. Well, we are in the final stages now of this build, and it's really just finishing touches and touch-ups and corrections and things like that we're at. So the ejector pin marks were still noticeable in these engine cowls, so I've had to do a little bit more sanding just to eradicate them, and now we're going back in and painting that up. I'm not priming it, I'm just going to give it 2 thin coats, and that should do everything that I need. Even though this has been painted before and then sanded back, I've still got some surface tension on there. Right, we'll give those a minute to dry and then we'll have a look at giving them a second coat, and then it's getting this engine and its cowls to fit. There's a little spar inside the canopy here that we have to paint in black, so just carefully doing that with a detail brush. Not a difficult job really, but I almost forgot to do it. Okay, that's done, and opportunity to just have a look round and make sure that we've got no touch up that we're missing. Right, there's a little bit here. I have to say I'm not happy with the finish I've achieved on this model, and that's partly because of the Humbrol 174 red that I've used, which didn't behave itself very well. Maybe partly I rushed the build, but you know, sometimes you just get a build and you keep making mistakes with it, and this has been a bit like that really. I think it's going to look alright in the end, but it has taken a little bit of time to get there. Okay, I think that's it for the black. So a little bit of green touch up, and then we're ready. Next job is to clean up all the little pins here, because there's no way that's going to go in until we strip the paint off. Right, now this Chipmunk model does have a reputation for being a little bit tricky around the engine area. So what I have done is I've stripped the paint off the connection points, and I've just gone in with a reamer and opened up the holes. I have just done a test fit and it seems to be fitting okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for it and get this beautiful engine mounted. So we're going to go around and give the connection points a dab of paint, and that will start to melt the surface of the plastic. Then we're going to go around and give it a second dab of paint, and what that will do is that will sit on top of the first one that's already started reacting with the plastic, and that will stay wet longer because it's sat on this sticky plastic. And that prevents us from having to add glue with the parts already in place, so you're less likely to damage your paintwork. And we can see that has gone in lovely. So the fit is so tolerance tight that you have to really make sure everything is nice and clean. So if you're not getting a good fit, it's probably you. There we go. Right, now then, that is our engine on. Now this then mounts on the front here, like so. And you have to make sure that you've got these on properly, because if they're not close in and tight, then you're not going to get this on. And I can feel those pushing this out of shape. So, and when I look at it, yeah, I've not quite got them tight in. So I'm going to have to sand off that front surface a little bit. Won't be seen because it's hidden inside that front cowling. So that's my next job. While we're waiting for glue to dry on the engine mountings, we can get this canopy fitted. So I'm using MIG Ultra Glue for this. It's, as a product, it's okay. Not my favourite glue, but I have it, so I'm using it up. Okay. There we go. A click is always reassuring, unless you're not expecting one. Okay, that is our canopy in place. And that completes the build of our Chipmunk. So that completes the build of our 1:48 scale de Havilland Chipmunk T10 from Airfix. What are my final thoughts? Essentially, this is a nice little kit, but it doesn't go together quite as well as I was hoping, and I think in part that's down to me rather than the kit. But let's talk you through highlights, lowlights, and then we'll talk about the build a little bit. So highlights of the kit. It's a very accurate and detailed kit with lots of surface detail. The cockpit is a highlight, lots of detail in there, and it builds up really nicely straight from the box. And the same is true of the engine, which has lots of detail, and when you finish building it, it really does look the part. I'm very happy with all of that. Low lights, we had quite a lot of sink, particularly in the cockpit pan, and some of the fit is a little bit tricky. The tail wheel solution, fitting it afterwards, you can't see where you're putting it in. Took me several attempts, and I'm still not sure that I've got it properly in correctly. So that was quite tricky, and perhaps a different solution is needed there. And this front end around the engine cowlings is a little bit tricky as well. Part of the problem is the tolerances are really, really tight. So if you've not got all of your connection points completely clear of paint, sanding, dust, and so on, you will have a little bit of a fit issue, and then that gets compounded, giving you fit issues for other things. I had heard that there was issues with fitting the little underneath panel underneath the engine. Personally, I found removing those little location lugs, see if I can show you what we're talking about. Yeah, the location lugs that go into these holes here, I found removing those, allowing the part to just drop a fraction, just helped with the location of that. And I subsequently had no issue. Most of the fit issues that I had were down to me not getting the connection points clean enough. So I lost my mojo on this build a little bit. Firstly, I got really excited about using these 3D decals, and these really let me down. It's put me off 3D decals a little bit, but I'll probably revisit them with a more trusted brand like Edward or someone like that. But these, they're oversized, they don't stick. You can't manipulate them, these belts, into a shape to get them to conform where you want. You end up super gluing them into place, and I'm not really convinced that the colours are particularly right, and there is a little bit of misalignment on the printing. So all in all, it's a good idea that doesn't work. At least that's my experience of these, and these are the first ones I've ever tried. And a combination of that, the Edward masks having a little bit of fit issues, my chosen paint system, the Humbrol Acrylic 174, not working very well. All of that has made me lose my mojo more than once with this build. I've walked away from it twice now, and I've had to sort of steel myself to come back to it. So at the end of this build, I'm not happy with it. It looks okay. If I did this model again, I'd come at it completely differently. Firstly, I wouldn't bother with the aftermarket, because everything you really need is in the kit. A little bit of detail painting on the dials, or using the supplied decals, you'd be fine. A different paint system, making sure your connections are clean, and this will build up to a really, really lovely model. Now, when it comes to the Royal Flight version that I've done here, again, the aftermarket decals have been a letdown. The register is poor. We've got lots of misalignment, and again, that adds to a slightly disappointed feel with the end of the build. But we've persevered, we've completed the build, shown you what a Royal Flight one would look like. I'm happy with my little bit of scratch building. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a couple of photographs. You can see it, warts and all, and we'll say This one is done. Let's move on to the next one. Thanks for looking in. You enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you very soon.